Scott Brackett.
Here.
Charles Burrows. Mike Finnegan.
Here.
Tim Gerlich.
Here.
John Stutzman.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
Okay, everybody had a chance to review the minutes, and, you have, got a motion on it? Anybody?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
And I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Chair?
Motion to address the Airport Advisory Commission need not request permission in advance. Action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for consideration and decision at a later time pursuant to ARS 38-431 et al. Okay, we're gonna skip down to number 5A. So she can leave early.
You.
Packet with the blue on it is from her.
Yeah, you each should have a copy of my presentation in front of you, but we are going to be sharing it as well over the monitor. It's easier to see that way also. So about a month ago, Mr. Hayes and I ran into each other in the complex, and he asked for a few minutes of my time to visit a little bit about the airport's budget. Part of it had to do with land sales, how those can be used, and the budget in general. And he has some very good questions. And so after our meeting, I got together with Steve and Gary and the city manager and thought that it might be important that I share the same information that I conveyed with Mr. Hayes, as well as maybe provide some more information to all of the commissioners. And all of them felt that that might be a good idea. So I'm here today to just share our general municipal budgeting process, oversight, and then talk a little bit about the airport's budget for fiscal year 20 and the capital improvement plan that was adopted for fiscal year 20 through fiscal year 24. So I wanted to start with a difference between private sector and public sector accounting, and just private sector and public sector in general. So background on me, just a very quick background. I worked in the private sector for almost 20 years before I came to the city and worked in the public sector in 2014. So I had a little bit of a transition in coming into the public sector as well, trying to understand the differences between private sector and public sector. And so I found three major differences. And one of those is that in the private sector, the main goal is profitability. Whereas in the public sector, it's fiscal accountability and using taxpayer dollars and user monies in the most prudent fashion. The budget process is also different. So in the private sector, it's really used as a financial planning tool. You can reforecast, but you're not required to comply with it, meaning that there's no law or regulation that states you have to stay within that budget. Whereas in the public sector, that's different. So we use it also as a financial planning tool to demonstrate fiscal accountability, long-term financial sustainability, and we are required to comply with it. State statute dictates that we cannot exceed what was approved by the council as far as budgeted expenditures, or what we call appropriations. And then just financial reporting in general. So transactions in private sector are reported in one single entity. Whereas public sector, we have many different funds, and every one of those transactions are reported in each individual fund. We have more than 40 funds in the city of Kingman, and each transaction, is, depending on what it's related to, is reported in one of those funds. So oversight. I stated that we are required to comply with state statute when it comes to budgeting. So state statute, Title 42, governs municipal budgeting. And what it states, and some of its requirements, and it's very broad. It does not tell us how to budget. It just tells us that we have to comply with certain budget requirements, such as the contents of the budget. So we have to have budgeted expenditures. We have to show the resources for each of those expenditures. We have to ensure that we're not exceeding the state expenditure limitation, and we have to be able to show budgets by fund. Also, public access and adoption. It requires that the council adopt the budget and that we have a copy of the budget available to the public, meaning on site and on our website. It also requires that we give the public an opportunity to, through public hearings, a two-public hearing process, to be able to give input to the council before they adopt that final budget. It also talks about the transfer of monies, meaning the transfer of budgets between funds. Because again, we can't exceed what we have already appropriated, but we can transfer budgets between funds, not monies, just budgets. And so what it says is that a city shall not spend money for a purpose that's not included in its budget. It also states that a city cannot spend money in a fiscal year in excess of the amount that that's stated in the budget. And that's regardless of whether we have excess available monies to spend during that year. So we've talked about land sales. And so for instance, we received Import Corner this year, $96,000 in a land sale. We did not appropriate for that particular resource or related expense. And so it was not approved in the original budget. However, what it does state is that depending on certain circumstances, and there are 4 of them, and all 4 of them must be met, that we cannot ever increase the amount of the city's budget by fund or overall. But we can transfer budgets between funds if the monies are available, so if the budget's available, if the transfer is in the public interest and is based on a demonstrated need, if it's not going to require us to exceed the state expenditure limitation, and of course, if the council approves it by a majority vote. So in those circumstances, so for instance, when we assumed the operations of the airport, we had no budget for it, and that was at the end of fiscal year 18. It was in the public's interest, it was a demonstrated need, we had available budgets from other funds that they were not using and weren't expecting to use, that we could go ahead and transfer those budgets so that we could bring in that airport budget. The council approved it, and we weren't going to exceed the state expenditure limitation. So in those sorts of instances, we're allowed to transfer budgets between funds. We are also required to comply with certain accounting and financial reporting standards that are established by what we call GASB. And those are ensured that we are complied with by hiring external auditors every single year that review our transactions and our reports and again, ensure that we're in compliance with that board. Let me grab a glass of. Thanks, Jesse. So as far as the budget process, it's a long process. It starts in October when we mail surveys out to our citizens for some feedback as far as our services and our programs, infrastructure, and it ends in June when the budget is finally adopted by the council. Now, there are many things that take place during this process, but I'm just going to cover quickly and briefly some of those steps that are taken and how it starts. So again, it starts with that survey being mailed to the citizens. Then, in November or December, we meet with the council to identify their priorities. Whether they're the same as this fiscal year's or they've changed, we need to determine that before we get into our capital project and budget development process. Then, at that point, we're working on our year-to-date financial recaps, our 5-year financial forecasts. We're also asking the departments, based on council priorities and based on their own priorities and what they know needs to be completed infrastructure-wise, the types of capital projects that they want considered to be included on that 5-year CIP. Once we get those worksheets back from the departments, we give those to the city manager for his review. Then the departments begin working on their operating budgets. And once we get those back, meaning we in finance get those back from the departments, we then submit all of that to the city manager. He meets with all of the departments to talk about the capital projects that they've proposed, make sure that they're in line with priorities, they're cost effective, they're generating revenues, whatever those priorities might be. And he also reviews the operating budgets with each of the departments. And then at some point, he puts together his recommended budget that he takes to the council. And the council then reviews. And again, we've had several work sessions during this time with the council, but presents that recommended budget to the council for their modifications and revisions. And there has never been a year since I've been here that the council has said, you know what, that recommended budget is perfect. They've always got some sort of modification or revision. Then we move to that public hearing process, and finally the adoption of the budget in June. Now, during that entire time, especially from January through April, we're modifying our financial forecast, we're looking at our revenues currently, and keeping them updated throughout the budget process. So let's talk specifically about the airport monies. And there have been questions that I've been posed with since we first assumed the operations of the airport. Questions about, where do those monies go? Do they go into the airport fund? So first, I want to let you know that all airport revenues that we collect are deposited directly into the airport fund and can only be spent on airport-related expenditures. Now, whether that be operating expenses, capital expenses, or transfers due to grant matches that we're required to contribute to, or because of general fund admin allocations. So we assess some sort of allocation to each of the departments who use finance and HR and the city attorney. And so those are all of the expenditures that are related to the airport. So then I've also been asked the question, okay, well, we don't always spend every penny that we budget. As a matter of fact, that almost never happens. And so there's some sort of excess left over at the end of each fiscal year. What happens to that money? Well, it rolls in to the airports fund, cash reserves that can be spent the following year for budget development. For instance, any excess that we have at the end of fiscal year 19 will roll into fiscal year 20 that can be used for fiscal year 21's budget development. So it all stays in the airport fund. Land sales and other non-recurring revenues, and just other revenues that I thought of since this, that also, again, goes directly into the airport fund. And we know that land sales are restricted for certain uses and must be used within a certain period of time. And so we track those separately, but again, they're in the airport fund. Something else too, we also receive interest. So the city of Kingman invests much of its cash reserves, and we receive interest from those earnings. And that interest does not go directly into the general fund or the HER fund. It is allocated to every single fund that has some sort of balance at the end of every month, and it's based on that balance at the end of every month, the cash balance. So even interest and investment earnings, the airport, related to the airport's cash reserves, so they are going to receive, or that fund is going to receive, the interest that is related. So I want to look at the airport's budget for fiscal year 20. Now remember, that process of the fiscal year 20 budget development was from October to June. But really, we have to be complete with all of our revenue projections and all of our expenditure requests and our expenditures that we're going to take to council by really mid-April, so that we can put the budget book together and get it to council in early May. So that all has to be completed by mid-April or so. But as we got close to that period, we were approached by the city manager and finance. I remember Bennett and Steve and Gary saying, hey, we might be selling some land. We've got an interested party that might be purchasing some land. And can we go ahead and budget for that? And our response was, we never budget for something that we think we might receive, because then we'll have some sort of expenditure tied to it. And if we don't collect the monies, if we're not confident we're going to collect them, and we're not confident in how much we're going to collect, then we still have that expense that can be spent. And we may not have the cash reserves, or we may not meet that 5-year financial sustainability, or that financial forecast based on, well, we're allowed to spend it because we budgeted it, even though we may not have received it. So that was our reason for not budgeting the land sales. Now, going into 21, we have 2 land sales that we've collected monies on that we'll be able to budget in fiscal year 21. So I just wanted to explain why, when you look at the fiscal year 20 revenues, land sales is not included on there. But you'll see that all of the other revenues, those recurring revenues that we receive, are on there. And we also have a particular line on there called the Department DOJ participation. That's due to the draw site investigative phase that they're on. They're paying for that, and so because we're going to be spending money out of that, we have to also include the resources that we're receiving the money from to spend that money. So then looking down at the expenditures, there are normal expenditures. All of our operating expenses, personnel, supplies, capital outlay, internal services. Those transfers that I talked about earlier, which are the allocations for administrative purposes, and to the grants fund. We have a couple of grants, maybe just one actually in 20, that we have a match for, that we need to contribute to. And then we always have contingency that we try to budget, especially in the enterprise funds. So $100,000 in contingency. Contingency funds are a budgetary reserve that are used for emergency or unforeseen expenditures. So for instance, major infrastructure issue that we did not budget for, did not expect, but we need to pay for. $85,000, let's just say. We have contingency here that the council can approve for us to move from contingency to be able to actually pay for that repair. It's used for those types of instances and those types of expenses. I also wanted to share with you the 5-year capital improvement plan that was adopted by council for the airport. Now, this 5-year capital improvement plan does not include all of the projects that were proposed by the airport management team. What it includes are the 5 years worth of capital projects that we felt we could fund, that had a funding source, that met council's priorities, that met citizens' priorities, and that, again, that we could afford to pay for. And so you'll see here there's a large $30 million project in fiscal year 20. That is, again, for the draw site, and it's for the cleanup phase of the draw site. And it's expected, we're really unsure what it's going to cost, but in talking to the city attorney, he felt we need to budget a very large amount, so that in the event that we end up spending it, we've got it available. Because again, we can't spend it if it's not appropriated or budgeted. So we put that in there. And then the rest, the remaining of the 5-year CIP, is just over $12 million. So much of that, as you'll see in the very bottom, I've got funding sources for each of those projects, for each of the projects by fiscal year. And most of our projects are being funded through grants. Over $11 million is coming from grants. Then we have monies from the operating fund for a portion of matching on those grants. And then just in general, for instance, the airport drainage study is just being funded out of those recurring revenues that we receive out of the airport fund. So it's coming out of the operating account. So that gives you an idea of the 5-year CIP that was adopted, each of the funding sources by year in total. And then I happen to include the 5-year forecast, and certainly not to look at all the numbers, but really look at the numbers that have the red dashed bar around them first. And those just happen to be our total revenues and our total expenditures that we are projecting over the next 5 years. And I only wanted to point these out because you'll notice that the revenues that we're anticipating to collect do not meet the expenditures that we're anticipating to pay out. And so at some point, as we go closer to fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24, something we'll have to certainly readdress and reassess the whether it's capital projects need to be relooked at, or identify a different revenue source, or apply for more grants possibly, but something will have to be reevaluated. And then I also wanted to share with you where the blue arrows are. At the end of the day, once our financial forecast is complete and all of our projections are done, at the end of the day, in every budget, including the airport, we, as a finance management team and as a city manager, look at those 3 key areas. Basically, our beginning fund balance, what are we going to end up with at the end of the day, at the end of the year, and are we maintaining our 90-day policy of, our working capital policy of maintaining 90 days of annual operating expenditures. So again, just an overview of what that 5-year forecast looks like, but to give you an idea of how we go about projecting, and at the end of the day, what we end up looking at every year as we go forward. So with that, I will take questions.
Well, I have a couple.
Okay?
You indicated we can't have can't budget something that we haven't got the money yet. Can we have a contingency budget for received land sale money that could be spent within that year if in fact we get it?
So currently, as I stated, contingency is for emergencies or unforeseen expenditures. However, we can certainly set up some sort of policy for the airport fund, for land sales, to where maybe we have a separate reserve for potential land sale monies or potential land sale reserves, something of that nature, so that we're able to restrict it. We all know, and the council knows, what those monies are intended for. I see no issue with developing a policy like that. And of course, council would need to approve that, but yes.
Okay.
That was, I'm gonna follow on with that. Because we have land for sale, which is money sitting in the ground, it's already there. We need to make some policy where we have the money in the ground and then it gets put into the account and how we would track that. And then that would fill up exactly what we're talking about. So that's kinda up to you guys.
Okay, in your budget process sheet, November, December, council identifies priorities for upcoming fiscal year. This issue never came before this commission. We certainly had discussions with staff about that. We certainly had no interaction that I'm aware of with the council. So what I'm wondering is should we be involved with that in the November and December and pass that on to council?
So there is a particular so let me share a little bit of background on that. So there is a commission that actually is a part of the budget development process for our enterprise funds, excluding airport, water, wastewater, sanitation. That's our Municipal Utilities Commission. And we're required to go to them every year, share the financial forecast, talk about fund balances, cash reserves, what they want to do with rates, and then they make a recommendation to council. That's the only commission that I was aware of at that time, at any time, that was allowed to do such a thing as far as that was in their purview. I don't know what the purview is of the Airport Advisory Commission, and I have not seen those guidelines. So if that is something that the Airport Advisory Commission is able to do as far as make recommendations to the council through some sort of formal process in one of their commission meetings, then absolutely you would be a part of this process. And that would not take place until probably January, February is when we do that with the other commission.
Yeah, that would come back again in April, the same process. And there we may be working with staff. But it was about that time when it was like everything seemed like it was already set in concrete. And as far as the whole overall policies relating to communication and decisions, so on, in the commission, little has been done, and it's in the process of being worked on now. So hopefully we can work this and fit it in, and I very much appreciate that we've got some timelines here that we can connect with.
Absolutely.
Another item is we had a state grant where within the day, actually I think it was in hours, we had to have an acceptance by the city. It's the end of the year, spend it before you lose it problem, and they may wait till the last minute, but they want a decision from the people who are gonna get it. Do you have something you can spend it on within our time period, shovel ready, if you will? Fortunately, this particular time, the people were around that could sign off on that. I don't know at what level it would have to be. It may depend on the amount, but that's something you can work from your side, that we need to have a process that if half of them are on vacation, somebody somewhere has the power to do this, or we might miss out on a big grant.
So that wouldn't be something that I certainly would be able to take the lead on. I don't have that sort of authority as far as accepting a grant or not accepting a grant, but that is definitely something that the airport management team can work out with the city manager.
We'll keep working through that side then.
Yes.
To bring that out further, I mean, basically it's a sync of the ARSs say this timeline for the city, the Fed operates on this timeline, we have to be able to sync them to be able to create the project. And that's where we're sitting there later on in the year. they're unforeseen. That's why we have to have that ability to do this, because without it, we're gonna get nothing. I mean, a lot of times.
So as far as accepting the award, I don't have the authority to be able to do that. However, being able to find funding for the award is a different story. I am able to give a recommendation on that. And what we do, if it's a grant fund, of course, we can't expend more than we budgeted. But in the grant fund, what we do is we budget a certain dollar amount every year that we have no grant designated for, because it happens frequently throughout the year. The departments will apply for a grant, never know if they're going to get awarded it or not, and all of a sudden they've been awarded, and we'll say, you know what, we've got undesignated budget for grants that, yes, you can go ahead and we can transfer that budget to your grant, as long as we can get the approval from the council if they accept the award. So as far as that piece, there's never an issue with that. And if there's a match, we would go to contingency for that, because we look at that as an opportunity for, to pay for a project basically free, other than a small match, which we would consider an unforeseen or emergency expenditure that could be pulled from contingency as far as the grant match is concerned.
Thank you very much for clarifying that.
You're
'cause
welcome.
Definitely, we don't want to be in that position where we lose something.
Definitely not.
And this is, most grants are not, as I understand it, that the government gets, are handled much different than airport grants. And this is, airports are funded from, to a very large extent, user fees that the federal government collects from airports. So, they are a grant, but it's not like it's free money. It's user fee money that's distributed to airports, because we gotta have airports all over the place for a transportation system, or there's no place to fly to.
Yeah, somebody's paying for that grant money,
Yeah,
for
oh
sure.
yeah, it's not free money, but
No.
it's not the same as, well, we just have some money to put out for art this year. It's not that. It really is where a big chunk of airport budgets always come from for maintaining the airport. Now, they don't build the offices, but they take care of the runways and taxiways and lighting and, things that are necessary for airplane operations.
Yes.
I guess my question, and you may want to approach, or somebody, Carl, and say, how does the feds, when they do this through aviation, that end of it, how does that interfere with the state ARS? Is there some little caveat that allows us to operate like, because we're not the only ones doing this. So, I mean, there's airports all over the state. So, I mean, they have to go through the same type of issues. So it'd be interesting, and I don't know the answer at all.
And so FAA are federal, it's federal grants. We have several, especially the police department, who receives several federal grants, and they run into the same issue. But it isn't, we don't typically have a timing issue as far as being constrained for time to get it on the council agenda for approval. Typically, they'll know in enough time to get it on the agenda for approval, and then we can move forward with it. It's not typically one of those, we need somebody to sign off so that we can use those monies, or at least be awarded those monies. So, so again, we can work with the city manager, city attorney, try to figure out how we can get that approved, but we can definitely find the funding for it. Of course, it depends. I mean, we don't budget millions of dollars in that fund, but we do have ample funding.
I think, Mr., go ahead, Steve.
If I may add to that, we've come up with, damn, this thing is sensitive. We've come up with procedures that I've run through Tina in regards to the review process. And if I recall correctly, the idea was we would take things to the council, package them, bundle them, I guess is the term you'd use, probably 3 or 4 or 5 times. There are a number of review processes that FAA is extremely anal retentive about, and we need to go through those for their approval. It's a very hands-on process with them. They're very participatory in this. But there is a process where once we get design done and we get into the whole bid process, where we go in and 5 things are all taken care of at the same time, and one of those basically is the city council approving the grant, number 1, and number two, the city manager or the mayor being able to sign off on that. So it'll happen ahead of the game. The dynamic with the grant that the chair was mentioning, which was a ADOT grant, basically getting $10 million, $10 million, no, not 10 million, $100 million, I believe, back from the state general fund where it had been swept over a period of 15 to 18 years back into the budget for the legislature and then out to ADOT. That dynamic was a quick turnaround. But again, we had the match. It was $200,000. It was a $20,000 match. So it wasn't an issue. And per contingency wouldn't be an issue anyway. But just a little more detail on that.
I was going to say, I think Scott touched on the fact that there are many airports in the state that already work through these processes. And I'm guessing that Mr. Johnston is the source of that expertise on behalf of the city for this type of function. So you're the one that's in touch with knowing what goes on and best practices in that, not necessarily the budget office for the city. You're to advise them on what you need, I think, or how things work. One of the reasons I'm sure we're all talking about this today is very early on in the fiscal year, it seemed like we were hearing that there were problems with the budget for the airport and that there were projects that were being pulled as far as actually being able to execute on because the money had to be reallocated to other things that weren't planned for. And it's a big problem. I mean, there's a lot of things that need to be done, and we're told, well, that's just not going to be able to happen because we don't have the money for it in the budget. And I'm curious, is part of that problem because the airport management for the city, if I'm phrasing that right, is new to the city? Is this a problem because it's a new budget process to the city to add the airport and to cover all the appropriate things, or do you have any insights on that?
So I'm familiar with a couple of the expenditures that you're talking about. One of them happened to be with $20,000 that we needed to reallocate to street repairs and maintenance, and that was for a couple of the roads in the industrial park. And because the county, I believe, was willing to contribute, we also had some of the businesses that were willing to contribute. We felt that we could, knowing that one of the projects that was approved, which was one of the environmental assessment cleanup projects, we probably were not going to spend that entire amount that we budgeted. We felt that we had a little bit of cushion, $20,000 in cushion, that we could reallocate. And so that was one, and it certainly wasn't a problem with not having the necessary funds. It was just, we felt that we weren't going to expend the entire amount budgeted, so we could take $20,000 and reallocate it. Another piece was the terminal airport remodel, which was a little bit more expensive than what we originally budgeted. And so thankfully, we carried over some funds from last year, and we should be able to reallocate within just the operating budget, not necessarily from any of the projects, but within the operating budget, we should be able to reallocate to cover that. So those are, and then Steve is also talking about that grant, that match. And so that was also one of those that we said, well, we can possibly pull from contingency, or if there's one of those projects out there that we don't think we're going to spend the entire amount or the entire amount this year, we can reallocate. However, all of those reallocations, so with the grant, for instance, it's got to come to council, they've got to approve it, and they've got to know where that money's coming from and why it's being reallocated from another project.
Okay. I feel like sometimes I'm always the troublemaker up here, but I do thank you for always coming out because the presentations you give are educational. And I know myself and some of the other members on this commission are not familiar with a lot of the processes here. And we're really trying to make the best impact we can on the airport and on behalf of the city and everybody that uses it. It's been painful at times because we feel like there may have been maybe missed opportunities because maybe we weren't brought up to speed and we're learning the hard way through error, trial and error. And we're just trying to find out how maybe next year things are better and we get more of what we think we're going to get or expect is going to be the best without running into problems with not having budgeting properly. And also there was talk there's a degree of frustration. I hope you understand that with previous management, there was a major struggle just getting them to acknowledge that we needed certain things to happen at the airport. And we're very pleased that we're able to work with a whole new group of professionals. But we feel like sometimes we're failing because we just don't understand the process to communicate our desires and what we think are priorities, and we miss the boat, it seems like, a lot. And I'm not sure where we go to avoid that in the future, but I feel like there's been some of that already. And because there have been conversations about discussions in this chamber or possibly at the other building where budget issues were talked about, and there was nobody representing the airport's interest while those conversations were happening about budgets. I had spoken to the airport manager. He said, I had no idea that was even going on. And they may not have been making a decision, but there was discussions that would have benefited from people with interest in what was happening at the airport to be able to speak on some of those matters. So I just like, somehow we got to get to where next process we can cover those things a little bit better, I think.
Well, I appreciate the input, and truthfully, the airport's new to us too. And as far as, again, as I stated earlier, we have many commissions, as you're aware, and we only have one commission that is part of that budget, capital improvement project, rates, cash reserve, and making recommendations to the council process. And so it's good for me to understand where you're coming from as well, and understanding the guidelines that are going to be given to you, and so that I can ensure that you are a part of the process like our other commission is. And so this is also helpful for me.
Yeah, I think a part of it, and I was surprised attending our first meeting, we had the city attorney present, but mainly he was there to express situations with open meeting law and process in that way. We really weren't given much to work with beyond that, telling us what to avoid, but our marching orders were not clear at all. We kind of thought we knew what we wanted to do, but I don't know that if we look at the documentation, you'll find any definition of what literally we are supposed to be doing. And I'm not sure where we go to define that. So that's something we need to work on for sure.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you very much. I mean, we've covered the finance end, and that's a big part of fitting into that system. And we can certainly do that. But Steve was new to the city budget the last year, and I know there was one meeting, I think the one you were talking about with the council, Steve didn't know anything about it either. And I got a call, are you going? What? It's not on the agenda. And that was with our previous city clerk. It told me it wasn't on the agenda, but it was. So we've had some confusion, and we're just trying to be there when we need to be there and get the input in, and good input when we do. And from what I see, it's certainly not been the finance department that's been less than clear. And I appreciate very, very much, again, that your time on this, and so happy I ran into you all that day and we got a chance to talk.
Absolutely, and I'm always available to come and share information with you. And I know that Steve provides you monthly revenue and expenditure reports, but maybe it would be beneficial if I came and shared just a quarterly report with you, and then at that point maybe take some questions or comments or concerns from you, so that as we move through this process, we're more on the same page. Does that maybe sound reasonable?
We'll consider that.
I was gonna say, but not to take up all your time, but the key would be after a land sale to know where we sit or whatever. I guess the inflow of the cash, and then what it'll do for us or could do, or.
I think that would be helpful for you.
Tina, you spoke to us probably close to a year ago out at the airport, and at the time I think we had $2.5 million in savings, and you said that was a sufficient reserve. Since then, we've sold 2 pieces of property for almost an additional $400,000. I'm assuming that's gone into the bank, and we're earning the interest on that as well. Could we, in our monthly report, we haven't received any of that information. And I think it'd be good to know exactly how much we have in funds, even though they're not funds available, until next year, if the budget process allows. I think we probably would have a better understanding, and I'm sure you understand that we get approached, probably everybody here on the commission gets approached by various users of the airport saying, hey, why aren't we doing this, and why aren't we doing that? And when you tell somebody, well, the budget doesn't allow it, that really isn't something that any of us probably have been able to explain thoroughly. This meeting today is going to help us do that. There's one thing, you say your main goals of accounting are, you point out the private and the public. A lot of your departments don't turn a profit. In fact, probably most of them don't. They provide a service to the public. I think the airport should also be providing a service to the public that is using the airport. And that's why some of these things are in here. And some of the things that were in our recommendation were scratched for whatever reason. In talking with people, we need to be able to explain why. And it hasn't been real easy.
Sure, I can understand. That's why I think maybe if we were to meet more frequently than just once a year or twice a year, it might be helpful, because then the
Yeah.
questions that you're receiving, maybe I can help answer those, or give you some suggestions on how to respond.
How much of the fuel flow is paid back to the city in the contract? Do we know?
How much of the fuel flow? We get 4%.
We give 4% of what's sold?
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. You have one?
Just briefly, you said our excess monies are getting interest. Is that just a bank interest, or is that an investment?
So it's an investment, actually.
And who makes that decision of where it goes?
So we have an investment policy that the council approved, and there's actually state statutes surrounding what we can invest in, and it is all about safety, all about liquidity, and less about yield. But we're earning about 2.5%, and it's invested at the state. The state treasurer actually has a state investment pool that governments contribute to, and that's where our investments are held currently.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And how much percent does that pay?
2.5% currently.
Okay.
It ranges anywhere from almost nothing back
You're
in
rich.
the downturn. I know, you're right, actually.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
You're
Again, I
welcome.
appreciate it.
And I'm always available if anyone ever has any questions.
Okay. All right, business park staff report. And did you get a copy of this, Bennett? I'm sure you can get one from
Here's one.
Steve, but there's
Are you going to ask me questions pertaining to that?
well, she mentioned the diminishing resources in year 5 under the present capital improvement plan, that something has to change. So I'm sure we're going to be looking for you to sell a lot of land between now and year 5.
Great. Well, good afternoon, you guys. So wanted to just update you on a few things, and then answer any questions that you might have. Recent economic impact analysis that we put together has been recently completed and added to our website. This document can be downloaded from the website, so you get the full report. I just wanted to hit on a few of the items in today's meeting on page 1, starting right here. The Kingman Airport and Industrial Park combined to create a total economic impact of $574 million. in Kingman and Mojave County in FY 2018. So this included impacts from the airport administration, on airport businesses, short line railroad, and the businesses at the industrial park. There were about 70 businesses at the park, created a direct impact of $406.7 million per year, which is effectively combined local production value of all these companies. It's approximately 2,600 employees working at the industrial park that make up about 20% of the city's employment base. Industrial park businesses supported an additional $134 million in economic impacts and approximately 1,100 more jobs. These are impacts that come just from those 2,600 jobs, plus those businesses create other jobs and other opportunities, and that's what those numbers are. This resulted in a total economic impact of $541 million. There are about 125 full-time and part-time employees working at the Kingman Municipal Airport, including city employees, employees at 12 on-airport businesses that create a combined direct impact of $22.7 million per year. The city and other on-airport businesses make local purchases, creating an indirect impact of about $6.7 million. And then the employees at the airport also make a local consumer purchases, generating an additional $3.9 million in annual induced impacts into Mojave County. These local employees purchase and contribute to a total economic impact, which estimates $33.3 million per year. This whole report is on our website, and so if you want to be able to find that, this is the homepage. You would just click on, you go to Business, Reports and Plans. Click there.
This is on the city website or the airport?
This is on choosekingman.com. This is the economic development website, is what I have it downloaded on right now. The airport site, which is the city site, it's not been downloaded yet. We just put this on there today. So choosekingman.com. So you can access it through there. Also, a quick link down at the bottom, you can just go to Reports and Plans. Yes, Scott.
I take it, is this gonna be part of the master plan, and you're gonna roll it in for those guys to use? Or, because they aren't gonna do their own economic analysis, I guess.
Yeah, they could use this information if they want to, as opposed to, generating, additional costs. That would probably be good. We partnered with the county on this report. Another document that we recently completed was the Airport Opportunity Zone Prospectus. And this document talks about opportunity zones, and it'll take a second to load this. What we did on this is we looked at some retail investments within the city, and then we looked out at the airport, some of our own properties, if somebody were to, look at investing or purchasing one of our properties. And obviously we looked at areas that qualify under the opportunity zones. I'm hoping this is going to load. Have you guys visited the choosekingman.com website yet? In there, we recently submitted this site to for an award through the Arizona Association for Economic Developers. I was notified yesterday that we were one of 2 finalists for this award, and we'll be attending a conference in Prescott coming up, and hopefully we'll be able to get that award. This is the same group that's also working on our airport website right now. So here's the Opportunity Zone Prospectus, and we talk about Kingman. We talk about our location, proximity to market, all those benefits. We talk about the airport. We do testimonials. We give testimonies about businesses out there. These are some potential sites that we looked at. We took 2 sites out at the industrial park and a 3rd site in town. And we did a prospectus around those. So the Commerce site, which is owned by the city. We looked at everything that the property has, utilities, what's there now, where is that located, what is the zoning, things that somebody might have questions. And what's kind of neat about this prospectus is I can send this out on, if I get a potential prospect that's calling about property, I have all the data, all the information already for them to send out to them. So this just goes into a lot of details on the site itself, maximum height that's going to be allowed to build the building, setbacks, any type of questions that they might have. We also talk about where our employees going to be coming from, and those graphics. And we also did one, and we called it an aviation-related manufacturing cell, prospect or opportunity. And then really quickly, we went into, so this would be manufacturing opportunities, and we looked at another piece of property over there by the Knopf building and what that one has. So this document can also be accessed through our website under that same area. In regards to land sales, I updated you guys last time I was out. We're just in the process of getting the appraisal done right now on that. Going through the normal transaction of business on that. We are, I guess, just out at the industrial park. Other things that we're doing along Mojave Airport Drive, you've seen some dead trees come down. The idea is to, obviously continue to clean the park up. The better our park looks, when I'm talking with industry and businesses, they come into a neighborhood just like when you're going to buy a house in a certain neighborhood. People make decisions on that. So we're going to continue to do those type of activities, continue to make the park, improve in the way it looks and feels when people visit. Other than that, that's my update. There's a website on the agenda. Tim, I'll probably let you just kind of take that, and then if there are any questions, go from there. So with that, if there's any other questions.
Any questions?
I'll just make a quick comment. Yeah, I agree. The cleanup in the industrial park is critical because definitely it was looking like something past its prime. You could see things had been done there that had been the trees, a big one. Like, yeah, somebody did take the time to put those out there, and now they're all dead, and things are kind of on the downhill slide of that. So I think it's a big improvement to clean that all up, and just like you're saying, to get new tenants looking at the place as something that's building, not on the decline. So, but we see that and appreciate those efforts.
And those are along, county right-of-way, so we're working within their right-of-way in many cases. The county was out last month doing some right-of-way work. If you notice, if you're out at the airport a little bit, you might have noticed them. They were doing some grading, some removing of weeds, things that, anything that they can do helps, obviously. We're all limited. And so I think together the park is improving in its look and feel.
Yep, I agree with that. I think so. Thank you.
Bennett Chandler just recently announced.
Who's that?
Chandler, down in Phoenix, a helicopter engine overhaul facility, Heroes, is moving down there and expect to be operating before the end of the year. And this is not a new building, obviously. It's 30,000 square foot building.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have buildings like that available. Is there any possibility of finding a developer that would build something like you showed up there on that, and try and, or at least get it all on paper and approved, so that if we get a business like that, they were from Santa Clarita, I think it was, California.
Did they locate on the airport side of the fence? Did they locate on the airport side of the fence or on the?
No, they run their engines when they overhaul them, I'm sure than a hush house. So, but no, they don't need to have an airplane. Engine just gets shipped out. But that's the kind of business that tends to be associated around airports, And I'm wondering if the reason we're not getting that kind is really because they want to have a building to move into, because they obviously made a quick decision. They were gonna be out of California before the end of the year.
Well, typically what I've seen is industries looking will want to have an existing business. Not very often do they come in and they build a facility themselves.
want to custom build something just for their?
Of the property information forms that I see, they want existing space to lease, get up and running.
Are most of those larger companies that want that, or are they individually owned? That's, the individual owners, I mean, my preference would be I
Yeah.
want the building built to whatever.
I would say there are companies that maybe have multiple
Yeah.
sites.
Yeah.
It's not just a one-time shop.
Yeah.
And so they're expanding, and they're getting into a market that they want to feel out. And if you're in a lease, that gives you flexibility that, I'm going to build my own building and own it. Doesn't give them. So.
Is Big Lots open to build buildings for people?
They'll do a build-a-suit, a lot of people will. And again, it's timing too. So you said they wanted to get up and get operational.
There's the
So
problem.
when
We'd have to
those
have it here.
projects come in, it's the same, we want to be operational in 6 months. And, they can find a lot of those buildings in the Phoenix, maybe some of the areas that you're talking about. There's just a lot more product. Since I started with the county many years ago, back in 2005, it was put out that, Mojave County in general has a lack of inventory. Once, people want to come into, and I think ours was at less than 3% available space up until the big industrial just purchased the Knopf building. And I believe that building's going to be leased out when they get it all completed in a relatively short time. I do send out, we got another one recently that I sent out to the whole park. Somebody looking for 12,000 square foot. They needed to do some distribution, send it out to the whole park. We got like 3 responses from maybe there's an existing owner that has a little bit of space in their building they're not using. So we've seen activity in that regards as well right now. So we do whatever we can to try to look at all options when it comes to these people coming and looking, and they're saying, okay, Kingman is a possible option, but do they have what we need?
On that respect, many businesses are using like 480 volts, 3-phase power. And is that available all
Yeah.
through the industrial park?
Yes, it is. It's not
And
an issue.
I would really like to see, I don't know if this is the time to bring this up, but I haven't heard anything about us trying to woo aviation companies. I would really like to see aviation companies and hear what's going on and try to bring them in here. I mean, I spent many years at Burbank, and you could build a complete airplane from scratch without going 1 mile from that airport. So I'd like to see something around here, because you can't hardly do anything at our airport. You can't buy parts and hardware and so forth. I'd sure like to see us wooing some of those companies to try to get them out here.
That'd be great. I think, if we have a good product on the website, that gets completed. We have the tools to be able to show them what we have. We do have in our budget this year for marketing for aviation businesses. I do believe, though, you got to come up with, what are we going to tell them? We've got to have the documents completed with the information. We've got a lot of that on the industrial side done. We've been working on it for years. On the aviation side, there's been nothing really done prior to the city taking it over. And so that process is starting right now.
And that may be part of my question. The answer to my question is, there's an upcoming aviation trade show in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Has there been talk about making an appearance there and at least maybe speaking
There
to
will
some
be
of
at
the
least
folks
3
there?
of it for people from the city there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
that's
our
news
goal,
I haven't heard.
and part of our goal is to attend trade shows, manufacturing, aviation, retail. And so each of us has different shows that we're going to attend. And so if you're saying 3, who's going to be attending that?
Steve and Gary and myself.
So yeah, there's always, as long as we're aware of it, and we are looking, from what I understand, Steve is very actively doing that. I do think that, gosh, if we had some documents in hand, you know, or something to talk to them about, it would be helpful if we are going to attend it. So I don't know how quickly that could be created, but
Steve has been working on aircraft storage and scrapping, you know,
Yeah.
there are an awful lot of airplanes going other places right now. There's gonna be a lot of 737s down the road before long, and hopefully we get some, but if Cassie doesn't get them, maybe somebody else will and bring them here.
Yeah, well, a big part of it is overcoming a reputation that's been around for a long time, that Kingman is not a friendly, Kingman Airport specifically, is not friendly to new business. I believe there's a gentleman who's, well, how long, 12 years now, is still the last new aviation business to come to Kingman Airport. And it's all about, this isn't a criticism of what's going on now, but it's about overcoming that well-established reputation that a lot of people have given up on looking at Kingman Airport because they've already been here. They've been here in the past several years, and where we're given the cold shoulder or no encouragement whatsoever to come here. And now we have good people to go out and get the message out that you're here and open for business. So that's why it's important.
And I think our existing businesses that we have, you know, to get testimonials from those businesses, you know. Scott, prime example, he's an aviation business guy, and so the more people like that, you know, say, this is the place, we located here, we like it here, we can accomplish everything we want to do here, and we have those stories to tell, those are beneficial.
Yep, I agree.
And I can attest to what he said, because I have a personal thing that happened in trying to bring my company here back in the early 90s when we had about 27 37s and 4-engine turboprops, and we came up here and made a deal with the board, and we shook hands and they went to lunch, and when they came back, they had doubled the price on us. So that was the end of that, and of course, that story's gotten out.
Well, I think going forward, I mean, it's been positive since I've been here. I think communication with businesses, the land sales that we do have are people that are already here, and they're saying, we want to grow here. So I think when people reinvest their money into an area, that's a testament of, you know, where they want to be, and that's putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, I agree, but I guess a message from a lot of us is we just want to make sure you guys know it's a priority to be the messengers out there to let people know, because there are a lot of people that probably are looking elsewhere that just have given up. I think you have followed me on that, and that now the message is let them know that things are different here and to have another look. If some of them have been here and left already, so it'd be good to reach out and get the word spread that it's time for a second look for those people that aren't here yet, so.
To give you one more name on that list, I would like somebody to reach out, and I haven't got a hold of him yet, to Steve Hinton with Planes of Fame. I know I've mentioned it, but I don't think anybody has talked to him and say, we're open for business. This is World War II airport. We get visitors from all over the world because of what happened here right after World War II, and his motif fits perfectly here. Like Steve said, that, hey, we're open for business and wheeling and dealing, come talk to us, you know? We'll buy you lunch.
Did you write that down, Steve? Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much, Ben, I appreciate it.
I am going to attempt to be concise here since we're sort of under a time bind. The
We're
room
gonna be out
is,
of here at before 5.
bingo, yep. You'll note on the report here that it sort of looks the same. Some numbers are missing. I'll be talking with finance, basically put something together that you can compare fuel flowage from one year to the other. The last report you got, we had 2 fiscal years mixed. It was 1 month and 12, and so it dawned on me this morning that there needs to be a little work on this. You'll probably note on the storage aircraft, we're down to 187, based aircraft at 95, plus or minus. On the second page, you'll note revenues year-to-date. So that's the beginning of this fiscal year, so we're 2 months in. And expenses and encumbrances. Again, the premise I have is basically doing something where you can compare one year to the other on one page, as opposed to this, which worked for their first year, but needs a little bit of work. So my apologies on that. And also, I think graphs on fuel flowage and a few other things were mentioned at our last meeting. I apologize that's not been gotten to, but we'll be working on that. In regards to FAA and ADOT coordination, the master plan, the third public meeting will probably be late October, so I'll keep you informed on that. Forecasts for the master plan were approved by FAA. That basically means we can continue to keep our 150-foot wide runway, which means we can continue to get folks with larger aircraft in here. That's a key. If we lose that width, we're done in regards to that business. The overlay grant, right now, we don't know if we're talking about 100% funded or roughly 95% funded, but nonetheless, an independent fee estimate is going out to a consultant. That will probably be back to staff by roughly a week from now, maybe a little more than that. Once that's back, I'll be putting something together to go to City Council, and in essence, the goal is to use some of that money that we had allocated for an environmental cleanup, because the estimate was low, and using that up front for the engineering, which will be about $140,000, it looks like. Again, all but 4.47% of that will be paid back to us through grants, ADOT and FAA. But the bottom line here is whether we're going to get 100% or whether we're going to get it at 95% to get this moving. The other thing that basically does is make it clear to the FAA that we mean business, we want their money, and get that moving. Again, that total grant's $2.6 million. The revised ACIP, which I'll talk to in a report, that's been submitted to ADOT. Slight differences on that than what we've had in the past, but not a lot. We've been offered a grant, and this is what was alluded to by the chair, by ADOT, because they have extra money that they don't want the legislature to take away, for $200,000 for design on taxiway Bravo. We should have that grant paperwork in hand probably, I'm guessing, outside month and a half, 2 months. And then on the 18th of September, myself, Gary Kellogg, will be in contact with FAA in Phoenix, in Las Vegas, and in the compliance division back in DC in regards to the RC models on airport site. So that's all moving. Airport development and maintenance projects, draw site coring is complete. They'll be out once or twice and then go through a litany of back and forth on their report to the Department of Justice. So that's in the works. I have a contractor coming in, I believe, October 1 to fill about 200 linear feet of the largest crack that we have out there, the one that's 7 to 5 inches wide. Hopefully once that's done, that'll last us until we rebuild that ramp, which is on the ACIP. So we're hoping 2 to 3 years. And that'll be done prior to the Airfest. Terminal remodel, it continues to morph, but it appears that this first phase is getting close to being complete. I'll be talking to folks about it is going to be complete before the Airfest. I've not gotten that in hand yet. The cost estimate we have in for the stormwater plan for the airport I will probably be taking money from one of those other projects we thought we were going to do, since we haven't had a valid stormwater plan for at least a year or two. And they're not cheap. They're about $15,000. A 15K regulator, which needs to be replaced, it has died. That's why you don't see any lights on taxiway Delta. Again, that should be a plug and play, and we'll be working on that. The 16-acre cleanup, that's on hold for one fiscal year at least. And then the maintenance staff, they're all off to, not Prescott, but Flagstaff tomorrow for traffic training. You've noticed when we're out there working by the road, we're picking up litter, cutting down trees. Well, we'll just say we've had one close call, and so we need to be safe. So in future, you'll see signs out there. Staff will be trained. Always, like anybody on the highways, looking out for cars that wander off the road. Hangar occupancy, we have 5 hangars that are vacant presently. Of course, our covered tie-downs, actually, we have 1 vacancy as of today, I believe, or yesterday. So it's 9 that are occupied at present. Jumping into ongoing lease development, the airport, 5 acres. Again, I need to work with the city to find a survey for that. I believe there's one that exists. And then we need to schedule time after the Airfest to remove the millings that are out there and place those on our access roads out on the air side of the airport. The rain event drainage study or survey, I've yet to follow up on that. One of my projects sitting there. Security, I believe we had a few things stolen from out in the industrial park near a hangar this weekend. Beyond that, the security folks have not mentioned any issues on the air side. So on that piece of it, we appear to be good, although the industrial side is still hit or miss. We're still working on the 1,800 acre land release. A map has been commented on, sent back to the consultant. What I expect the next step will be is a booklet that we go down and start to negotiate with the FAA on what they're going to require. And I think I've said this to all of you. What we managed to get back in the 1980s with the first 1,000 acres, don't plan on the same conditions being applied. Unless FAA is dumber than I expect that they are, given that timeline of a number of years that have gone by, there will be additional conditions. Do I know what those are yet? No. But I expect that they'll come up with something. I'd be surprised if they didn't. The trailer, we've given about 3.5 months for a nonprofit group to get the trailer off the airport. They paid money for it. They were sent a return receipt letter. They were sent a letter by regular mail, and there's a notice posted on the trailer. If the trailer has not moved by the 14th, then that next Monday, I'll be calling the fire department. They need a trailer for their remodel. And the money will not be refunded. But 3.5 months is enough. So we're going to move on. I mean, it's unfortunate, but yes, sir.
On that respect, I did notice that they're asking for help and donations to try to get the thing moved because they didn't have enough money to find somebody to move it for them, and they've posted it as a deadline. It's that the Pets of whatever, it's a nonprofit.
HALT, I believe, is the outfit.
Right, and they're trying to get it accomplished, so they're asking for people for help or whatever to get the thing moved. So
Yeah, but again,
they are worried about it and they are trying to get it done.
no, and I understand that, and I've heard that as well from others. The bottom line is, we said a month. It's gone to 3.5. We have the Airfest coming up. It needs to go. So hopefully, they're able to figure it out between now and the 14th.
At the 14th of September?
That is correct.
Now, what do they pay for that?
$1,000.
And if you You said you're gonna do what with it if they don't comply?
Our fire department has basically said they need a trailer for their remodel. They've taken one, then the fire department, should they want it, has a shot at it. Should they not go down that road, then we will advertise it again for somebody else to pay us money to take it off our hands.
So you can't just outright take an offer from somebody else, it has to put out there?
It has to be a competitive process per the procurement regs here at the city, yes.
If,
Unless it's a city department, in that case, they can basically come up and just take it. Yes, sir.
if you decide to give it to the fire department for use,
Yes.
will you get it back then?
Absolutely not.
We don't want it.
Okay.
It's a
Can you
one-way
get
shop.
some money from the fire department's budget for it? You gave them the last trailer with no budget, and that was probably an easier trailer to market since it had a hitch and had,
All the
tires.
tires were attached, yes.
Yeah.
I could probably ask, I don't know if they have any money in their budget.
well, they
But I
could
could ask.
transfer some from one, you know. We learned that
Well, you
earlier
know,
today.
The fire department does some favors for us too, you know.
They do
They've been
indeed.
out with their ladder truck and changed all the light bulbs up on the tower.
And we gave them a trailer already.
Steve, has that trailer had the hitch cut off of it and the wheels cut off? Or is that something that can be just
Wheels are not
attached?
there.
My understanding is
underneath.
all
They're
of the
un-
hardware is underneath. Now, I don't know if the tires actually hold air, but yeah, everything is underneath the trailer there.
Well, I mean, that's readily available, so that's really all they need to do is hook that stuff up and
Yeah.
tow it away.
I appreciate Mr. Amspoker's fiscal awareness on this, but quite frankly, there's probably people that were willing to help pay to get the thing out of there. Once the skirting was removed, it's really an eyesore because there's all kinds of things hanging down below it. I've had people that I don't know walking from the fuel pumps at Terminal Building make various jokes about it when they walk by and see me standing there, and we just really want it gone. The people that bought it apparently didn't have a proper plan in place, because people have asked them, how much do you need? And they don't know. They don't have an answer to it, because people would like to help them make it so, but that's where we're at. I think a lot of people would just like to see it not there anymore.
I think we'd all like to see it gone.
So we continue to remove trees. You will note more trees going horizontal out there as time goes on. Again, we are in the process of planning for the Airfest, and the airport will be sponsoring security for that Friday night through the security firm the entire night, so they'll be out on site. And with that, any questions?
I'm just curious, I probably should already know this, but the 16 acres that you referred to in the report,
Yes.
roughly where is that located?
It's just to the north of the Guardian Building, that hill.
Between
Goes
there and
up there.
Lowe's,
I'm sorry, between there?
between a Guardian and Lowe's,
Lowe's.
Fuel
Oh,
Depot.
okay, yes, okay, thank you.
On old business 4B, revised grant airport capital improvement plan, do you need a vote on that?
That would be, and again, I did it up front, and I'll try to be better about that, but that would be nice, yes. And again, do we want to deal with that, just shift gears and deal with that right now?
Oh, no, we don't have to do it right now. 'Cause
Okay.
I just thought it fit right in, so go, please continue on.
You said that there are 5 hangars available, and how many are on the list waiting for shade ports? You said 4?
On the sheet,
Yes, on the sheet, I believe there's 4,
covered tie downs, they call them.
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you.
Okay, airport website, guess you're gonna cover that, Tim?
Yeah, I don't think this will take very long, but we did receive an invite to do a survey from Bennett, and it looks like a survey was put together by the contractor. I went through it. It was a little tough because I want to answer things as literally as I can, and a lot of it was designed, the questioning was designed for more of a city website. It looked like a lot of the questions were related. Some were airport-specific questions, and some were more as if you were designing a website for a city. And so I just went through it. I realized I was not going to be happy with any of the answers to some of the questions, so I just went through it and put down whatever seemed like it made the most sense. It was useful because they provided a number of examples of different architecture of websites, and I went through all that and made some suggestions and references. I think all three of us went through it now. But it was a good start, and just curious where things move forward.
Yeah, so all three, everybody went through it. And so now they're going to get back with us after they put that comments, everything back. Also, as part of that, I did put together a site map in the bottom of that email. And just wanted to make sure that you guys had a chance to go through that. Did you get a chance to read through that? And
It was kind of, looked like an outline, kind
yeah.
of, with a bunch of different
Correct.
topics and information in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So basically, that would be like at the top of the website, different tabs you'd click on, and then it'd have drop downs, and then you'd have different information
Okay.
under
Yeah,
each one of those.
when you first look at it, it looks a little overwhelming, and I'm thinking, I hope, but I get it now. Those would be headings, basically, each set of
Yeah.
things. Okay, yeah, that
So
makes a lot of sense.
basically, these are all ideas I've taken from other airport websites. And so we want to look and see, do we think this is something we want to include in ours, or are we missing anything as well? So-
I'll make sure everybody goes back through and looks at that, but I did read through it,
Okay.
and everything kind of made sense. The KAA thing was
Yeah,
addressed.
it was KMA is what
Yeah,
it should have said.
certain of us have these reactions when we see those letters
Well,
together, so.
Yeah.
And it was the number one thing on the list, too, so I do recall that, and others commented on it to me, too, so. But yeah, all that made sense. We'll look through it, and I guess we'll make any other suggestions if anything's missing
Okay.
from that. And then, is there any idea on a timeline on what the next step that we'll be involved in?
I believe within the next week,
Okay.
you'll hear back.
And I think I kind of voiced this in the survey, is one thing we want to make sure, I looked at a lot of airport websites going through this, and a lot of them are just so generic. It's like the generic airport website, and everybody just has to check off that box in their city that they've done it, or the county, or whoever the governing body is for each airport. I'd really like to make sure that the uniqueness of the facility we have and its history is not lost, that it's just another generic site. And I think you would agree with that, and I think there's a number of folks that would like to see that happen. Well, we want to promote the future of the airport and what it can do. We also want to show some bit of a unique flavor of what this place is and what it was. So I think that's important. Otherwise, like I said, there's just that whole generic feel that I saw from way too many websites I've been to looking at this.
Well, and obviously, as we go through this, you're going to be part of that and see what they give us, and then be able to comment back. This is my first airport website, and you probably have more knowledge of kind of what you guys are looking for. So between the three of you and Steve, I think you should be able to create a pretty cool project
I think so.
result. But it's going to be driven based upon what you guys, you're going to be part of that process, so.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. I think that'll be great. Okay. Questions or anything else? No, that's all
Okay.
I have.
Now, do we have something on the revised capital improvement plan, or you want to do now, or not now?
No, we can do it now.
Okay.
In essence, you'll see it there in your packet. The projects are pretty much in the same order until you get to the tail end of the second page. The dollar amounts have bumped up And again, you'll notice that the runway project is not listed because that's, though we've not been offered a grant, that's underway. And so just briefly, in 2021, and again, this is always up for change, 200,000 for the airport drainage plan, and that's on the air side, that's not on the industrial side. 1.3, actually 1.4 million for the first phase of rebuilding taxiway Bravo. The next year, 2022, the second phase, which is roughly $1 million. And again, these are all grant funded, by the way. In 2023, rehabilitating the apron. So this would be the apron with the large crack. And this runs all the way from Straubbe's all the way down to Leonard's. So it's a huge amount of square footage. In 2024, the draw site. And again, as things develop, you might see some of these flip-flop a little bit. And that was 2.3 million. In 2025, 1.2 million for fencing. And then in 2025, 125 grand for rehabilitating, doing the design work, and I believe construction. Actually, no, this is just design for the taxiway that parallels, well, actually, it's, it parallels Delta, a little further to the west of the airport. Mr. Gaines, it's in front of his property, Cassie. It's partially concrete in some spots, and I believe asphalt in others. So that's the latest and the greatest. Again, I'd be remiss in saying that it probably won't morph and change again by next year, depending on grant opportunities that come our way. So any questions?
Yeah, Steve, you have one on the taxiway B 2021 and one in 2022. Are you just doing half and half?
That is correct, yeah, and that's at the FAA's insistence.
And they want to do which half first, the one closest to the runway?
Probably, well, maybe. I would guess that the part they'll do first is the northern section, where it's coming off of...
Coming off the taxiway?
Yeah, yeah. Although we could, that's probably up to us. We can basically make a case to start from the other end, if you like.
Well, you know, it's that's the key thing in getting jet hangars built.
Okay.
And yeah, it'd be nice to put that right out in front of their hangars, but would it be good enough to use what's there until that year on the taxiway, the other end, to taxi through?
Yeah, I'd have to go look at it. I mean, all the pavement out there is pretty horrid, to be honest.
We don't have to make a decision about that now,
Yeah.
but I think that's, you know, that is an issue. Which do we do first? You do the other one first, and there you say, gee, I'm gonna build this building, but there's no taxiway here. And that ain't good either.
The other thing is it gonna be PCC? It is gonna be concrete again.
It is not.
I
The
think we should- I think
The FAA will not do concrete for this kind of airport. I can tell you that right now.
if we make a economic case, because I have several studies showing it is way cheaper in the long run. I'll give them to you. I've got, and they're done by state departments and PCC.
And we can attempt that, but I can almost guarantee you from what I've seen with GA airports in the 32 years I've been doing this, they will not go for concrete. They will go for asphalt.
We're putting jets there. I mean,
Understood.
the second you shift with our storage and that, we're in a different category than strictly a Deer Valley or something like that. So that's, at least we could make a pitch to them is my.
We can make a pitch.
Yeah, we can make a pitch. And if it costs more money, maybe we have enough land sales, we can make the difference up. The difference shouldn't be that great now. I mean, the data I've gotten will and we can talk about it, but I just want to throw that out.
Certainly.
I was just curious, it's slightly off that topic, but master plan progress, what's the next step, or where's?
There will be a
Schedule.
meeting in late October with the master planners. They will be back in town, and I believe they will be going through the forecast, which they've generated, and then I believe scenarios for development out there. And I'm guessing probably at least 3 to 4 different scenarios. Nothing will be one of them, and then and I've not talked to them about their scenarios, but I would tend to think you'll have a total of 4 scenarios at the very least.
Okay, and then when's the projected completion on that project?
I'm guessing probably spring of next year, or thereabouts.
Okay. You want a motion?
Please.
A motion to accept the revised airport capital improvement plan as presented?
I make a motion, we accept the
I
revised airport
second that.
ACIP.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Mission statement, I mentioned that last time, and I went back through my records, and we did, I don't know to what extent it was really passed, but we did put out a mission statement. I gave that to Gary to run upstairs and see if there's any problem with that, and I haven't heard back yet. And geez, I'd like to get this thing going and get council's approval on it and so on. So if you have any comments on what should be in our mission statement, that is everything we should be doing as a commission, please get them to me, and I will compile all of those with whatever Gary comes back to me with, and we'll see if we can put one together next month. Okay. Landscaping at the terminal building. Your committee.
This is a picture of the terminal with grass that's green. I have a few more pictures, but it gives a general outline of what we're dealing with, the trailer that everyone's talking about. And Carl and my thoughts are that the fence, let me get to a different picture. I got a little more resolution on this. This is off the county website, but you can actually see the fence line. I couldn't rotate it for some reason, but you can actually see the fence line that we're talking about. For the Air Fest, to have a staff come back and stuff that we could accomplish before the Air Fest or whatever. And one of them was remove the gate to the ramp access, put the big tall fence on the sidelines. They go on the sides, and they're over here on the sides. So, and I don't have any specifics on the actual grass placement and all this. Again, a drainage survey to kind of know where we're at. I do have, I'll go like this. Okay. This one was off the county. You can see kind of a red line running through there. Some of it's elevation, but some of it's kind of drainage. So it's where the two arrows are. There's a red line kind of running through there. So that's approximation of what we're looking at. So these are the pictures that I grabbed off the internet to give you an idea. And more of it's comments on what we really want to end up with. But for right now, it's what kind of could we accomplish before the Air Fest that would make it more usable for the people that are going to show up.
Which is, can you summarize?
Moving the gate end of it right here along the front over to the side, so we get a tall gate going around that wraps around the airport that way. And I mean, of course, it's mowing the lawn, but that's just the standard. And both of these are, one's gone, the other one will be gone, so that's what we're looking at. We've talked about an arch to match the arch and different things. And there's also a couple little steel posts that staff could remove or whatever that are sticking up and
Talk about the rock work there.
yeah.
I want everybody to look at that.
So this is kind of what we can do beforehand and then come back on it, because some of it may take budget and we don't have a budget per se for this item or anything, so.
Yeah,
Questions?
the idea is to make the area in front of the building and in front of the tower grass area open to the ramp, and then have the fence come back the sides with a pedestrian gate right where the FedEx door is, so that anybody can go in and out of there from the airport, and then one on the other end so they can come out of the kitchen and go around for the barbecue. And then copy the shape of the sign down Beale Street with a welcome to Kingman Airport. And I asked the steel guy today to give me some idea of what something like that would cost. And he wouldn't do the lettering, but he would put the frame up and a similar shape arch. And then we wouldn't have any of the wood signs on the fence. And temporarily, we'd move the signs to the outside, where you still have a sign and it's right there at the building. But that area in front of that building, if we just take that fence out, is now open for Airfest. And the rest of the fencing can be done when we have budget money available. We're not 139 right now, so we don't have to have a 6-foot fence in.
I'm not one for fences where we don't need them, but I'm just curious what thoughts gone into any potential hazards leaving that area open like that. I mean, if I had my own airport, I'd like to do something like that, but I'm just wondering what thoughts gone into any risks involved with that.
We had talked about putting on the ramp, painting, a warning or whatever, that you're heading towards a ramp, just stenciling it on the concrete.
And will there be restricted access at any time from people, say, if they parked a car in the parking lot, whether it's after hours, I don't know, but is there any thought is that area ever secure?
Yeah, there'll be fencing all the way around so they can't get into the building from this, so it'll be all fenced after hours.
Okay, and then will there be some kind of a keyed access entry or something through that area?
This same gate, we could use exactly the same gate with the 122.8 on it.
Okay.
On the backside to get into, to be able to access the pilot lounge, and in there will be coming off of here.
Well, I'm just wondering about coming back onto the airfield from the parking lot side.
Yeah,
You'll be able
right
to,
where the FedEx store is,
yes.
that would be the entry to go to the ramp.
That'll be a full-sized gate instead
Yeah.
of the short fence
Right.
now. Okay.
Right, so that way they can go into the building, or they can go around the building out into the parking lot, or come back in anytime, day or night.
Okay.
Is there gonna be a dial code on the front door so that if somebody lands
On the air side, not the
Air
street
side.
side.
not on the street side,
Well,
so
they could go around the other way and come
There's
back.
gonna be a gate over where my cursor's kind of flashing over here. A regular access punch code gate right there.
okay.
Back
So
home.
then they could go around and come in through the
Yeah,
back
Yes.
and they could walk around and just come
and
out.
get to the pilot's lounge.
Right.
And you're talking about having something completed by October 19th?
That's what I'm led to believe.
Okay. Seems very ambitious in the way things work. That's just a
Have you
few
already
weeks from
contacted
now.
a fence company, or?
No, we can do that, but
staff looks like they can do that, they can pull that out without a problem, so that.
Yeah, it's a removal. I mean,
One way or another, we could get it opened up for the Air Fest. And the sign won't come till later, the landscaping is, we've gotta go through some kind of consult, but there will need to be a little bit of grade change for drainage, so it doesn't come back on the slab. But not anything significant. But there's some rock work out there by that FedEx door. I don't know what was there, but one's about 18 inches by 4 feet, and the other one's maybe 18 inches square. It had a light or something out of it at one time. Beautiful rock work, but we either got to figure out how that will fit down the road, or move it if it's movable, or knock it down and get rid of it. So look at that the next time and stand back and visualize what could that be.
Wolf may know, if you ask Gene Wolf.
As far as the grass is concerned, I know there's been some controversy or differing opinions on that. I think there's probably a compromise that can be made on that. I'd really like to see the grass stay on the tower side at the very least, to create kind of a visitor-friendly area outside that tower where the tree is. There's some shade. There's kind of an old picnic table out there that probably should be looked at again. It looked like a little bit disrepair. But I'd like to, that's my feeling anyways. If we sacrifice some of the grass for other landscaping, I think that's acceptable. I'd really like to keep some of the grass, at least to that one side, if we can.
Well, we want to get it mowed good for Airfest,
Yeah.
so it's not so chunky you can trip on it. But this is not the time of year to put in a lawn.
No.
This is springtime, and
Well, everything would have to be moved at the same time. The grass is the last thing you're gonna do, so you gotta move stuff around. So we haven't decided on any of that, but
other sprinklers.
there's a lot of sympathy in the same thing. If kids come out and they're near a picnic table and they wanna play on some grass.
But what can we do right now? It's the fence, so that's open for Airfest, and I think that's the big chain link fence with a barbed wire on top is a prison ambience to it rather than welcome to the airport, and I think that'll make a big difference. But eventually, I think everything will work out good.
Steve, have you been involved in any of these discussions? I'm curious.
Yes, and
Okay.
actually, I've been talking to some of our consultants in regards to, are we required, since we're no longer 139, to have a fence? And yes, we are. Can said fence be removed in front of the terminal? Yes. You have I believe, a 4-foot fence on the north side, and I believe there's a partial 4-foot fence on the south side by Careflight. The dynamic is going to be, if we remove that fence in front of the terminal, we will not have time, more than likely, and you caught that, to put in another 6-foot-high security fence. So basically, the bottom line here is, for a period of time, and I can't tell you what that is right now, on the two sides of the building, you're going to have a fence that doesn't meet any kind of standard. And again, if it's for a short period of time, part of a construction project, it's probably not a major issue. But as users of the airport, are you all comfortable, and do you think the people who you represent are going to be comfortable for a period of time with a lack of security that we currently have in that one area?
Yeah, I find it odd that I'm on this side of kind of this discussion, because I'm pretty progressive on some of my thoughts on things I'd like to do at the airport. But the good news is, I think people want to obey the law and obey the rules. But whatever we do, we have to make it possible for them to understand that maybe they shouldn't be running out on the ramp. And anything that even delineates that or something, I just think something will get very good compliance, because people don't want to get in trouble usually, especially if anyone's around. I'm just thinking something. The 6-foot fence versus a smaller fence, generally people that are gonna behave are gonna behave. They're gonna go, oh, we shouldn't really be out here unless we have a reason, but I don't know, I'm not sure on that.
Most FBOs, if you go in the front door of the building, you go out the back door and you walk out onto the ramp. So this would be a very similar situation to that, as many terminals are. But there's no reason why we can't have a red line out there like the military fields typically do, with some lettering on it. It says aircraft operations, personnel only. If they can read, but the number of tourists, and they're there every single day trying to take pictures through that chain link fence. And it's sure gonna make their photography a lot more pleasant.
The other thing is you came into aviation post 911. You go back into the 70s and all that. And before they put that fence there was some little barbed wire fence running down a flight line in Kingman or whatever. So it really hasn't posed the problem that we think. And psychologically now we're conditioned to gotta have something. So
It really got put up to keep the cows out from eating the grass. And I'm very serious, that's not a joke.
Okay, well, as the troublemaker, I seem to always be, I generally like the thinking on this, I just trying to make sure we understand everything we're getting ourselves into.
But we should get a motion on that if we want to do that before the Air Fest.
I'd make a motion that we work with staff to accomplish the mission before the Air Fest of trying to remove the fence and do that.
I'll second that.
Question on that, is there money required to do it, and is the money available in the current budget to do it, or are we wasting our time right now?
Money to tear the fence down out in front.
It was going to be all internal staff, so I don't believe there was a budget associated with it. That's what I was led to believe. Steve?
I'll look into it. I don't have numbers at this point because I haven't talked to any fence folks. And I'll talk to my staff and basically see if we're up for removing it. It's possible we could, but again, until I talk to them and basically see what it's going to, what sort of equipment, can we do it? Or do we hire somebody to come out and remove that one small section of fence?
You could call for volunteers, and I think you can get it.
Yeah, I think you could get volunteers, and the tractor with the bucket, I've pulled a lot of stuff up.
Anyway, I'm willing to go along with the motion on the caveat that we don't know about the execution yet.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay,
Aye.
motion carried. One opposed. Oh, you are opposed? Okay, so one opposed. I do want to have, this is really kind of an announcement, report wasn't made on the terminal itself. I submitted a punch list on what still wasn't done. My understanding is that the brackets for the counter are there and installed. I thought the counter was delivered. I don't know that for sure. Do you know, Tim?
No, I saw the brackets up, but I don't know anything about a countertop there.
Okay, I know they're ready to put it in. The stools are ready to bolt in, and a number of things that are coming out from the museum are ready to go. Hopefully by the Air Fest, the inside of that will look pretty good. I did talk to one council member about the photograph being enlarged on the wall of the B-17 when it's here with a pose with a tower. We thought that was a wonderful idea. So there's still, IMA has collected quite a bit, and she did some over the door, which looks really great if you look at that going into the cafe. But she wants to coordinate everything she's got with all the rest of the stuff. So it looks bare, but things are moving along.
On the subject of the photo, there are a number of folks, probably including Ame, that we really feel the emphasis should be putting on period photographs more than the new photograph that's being discussed. That it would mean a lot more for a visitor to come in and see an original photograph taken during the Army airfield time or the depot time than a brand-new picture of a current day.
Be nice if we could get
Thing.
the tower and the airplane together. I don't
But
know
you
which
understand the difference is that something that shows the actual history, where you can walk in and see a real thing that happened 70-something years ago, would have far more impact than a brand-new photograph. And there's a number of people that have expressed that, including myself. So I think that should be talked about
At the
that.
museum looking for the pictures, they got a lot of them.
Yes, well, yes.
Okay, any announcements from any of the commissioners? Motion for adjournment.
Kingman Air Fest, Saturday, October 19th. That's the announcement.
And if I may add, a planning meeting Wednesday evening out at the admin building at 6 o'clock this Wednesday.
Yes, thank you.
One thing on that, are you, in the terminal, by October 19th, are you gonna have articles, aircraft parts and stuff inside there, relics or whatever?
The plan, as I understand it, is yes. I wish Gary was here because he's coordinating that. I don't know, I can't say for certain.
Gary
Kellogg, yeah,
coordinating that?
yeah.
Well, if somebody wants to come to my painter parts, I'll probably have parts stuff fit. Donated a couple to Steve. But, say again?
Move to adjourn.
Oh, excuse me. Motion to adjourn, thank you. Second?
Seconded.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.